beautiful sounds born out of the depths of the trials and tribulations of a young girl who endured repeated traumas, mostly sexual abuse that marred her childhood and beyond, but now resilience. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Ageless Glamour Girls podcast, where we talk all things aging on this beautiful and sometimes, a lot of times, challenging but liberating ageless aging journey. And besides politics, nothing is off the table for discussion. I'm your host, Marquita Curtis Haynes. I'm the CEO and founder of the lifestyle brand Ageless Glamour Girls, which celebrates, embraces, empowers, motivates, and entertains women age 50 plus. We are so glad that you're here. We're continuing our Ageless Book Author series with a book that says, yes, we experience trials in our lives, but those experiences can make us much stronger. High five to that. Today's guest is sharing her story about her traumatic childhood, events that can impact you, shake your very foundation, perhaps throughout your entire life. Kyeni Matee is a violinist and a youth orchestra teacher and the author of a new book. It's called EYES Behind the Violin, a memoir, Finding My True Identity. Welcome to the show, Kyeni.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You are such a beautiful person with a gift. You're a talented musician, and the violin isn't the only instrument that you master.
No, as a music major, you do learn other instruments, but I specialize in the string instruments. So I play all four of the string instruments: violin, viola, cello, and bass. But the
Mhm.
violin is my primary, and I also play the piano, organ, other other instruments as well.
Now, guys, Kyeni is just being very modest. I've seen her sing and playing the piano. I don't know why she didn't mention that, but I'm going to bring you some of that right now. Check this out. And breathe light into my aching soul. One way, one light, one hope. Only one. That's beautiful, Kyeni.
Thank you. Thank you. It's one of those things that I picked up in college and have used it as another form of expression. And it's been amazing for me, an amazing experience.
Wow. Wow. Thank you. We're going to talk more about that later and how music helped you heal, how it played a big role in the whole process. Now, your memoir is about the trials and repeated traumas that began when you were very, very young, but continued for several years, and the abuse went unaddressed until your adulthood years. We're talking mostly sexual abuse, but you also talk about there was some physical abuse in there. Now, which came first and at what age?
Um, the sexual abuse came first. I was about 7 or 8 years old when the sexual abuse started,
Mm,
and that went on up through my early teens.
mhm,
Probably I was probably maybe mid-teens, 14 or 15,
mhm.
and then I experienced some physical abuse from my mother's husband. But one of the things that I actually forgot to even mention to you, physically speaking, was I was also the product of bullying, which also contributed to a lot of that, a lot of the problems that we're having. And I was beat up badly by the biggest bully in school.
And
And so
which school, what grade were you in?
this was elementary
The
school.
same elementary school.
Yeah, this
Wow.
was elementary school. Yeah, they picked on me because I was bigger. That was the only reason. I was
Mhm,
bigger than everybody else, and so I became the target. Very
mhm.
traumatic, but but that's some of that. And I wasn't even thinking about it when I was talking about it, and just realized that what, that was a big part of it as well. The whole bullying thing was a big deal.
So there was the bullying, and then, so you were 7 or 8 when you were first sexually,
Yes,
um, assaulted, by a family member?
it was a family member. It was a cousin, and
Mhm,
it's just so happened because when my mom divorced my dad, before that we were going to a private school, And the private school, they had like aftercare hours because both
Mhm,
parents were working.
mhm,
So they would just pick us up after they were done working. But then when they divorced, my mom remarried and we moved to another area and we started going to a public school. And there was
mhm.
no aftercare hours. So we were sent to a cousin's house. And because of that, that's where the abuse took place. Because that cousin was watching us. It was on and off by that one person from, like I said, around 7 or 8 years old until I was about 15.
And you
But there
just
were but there are periods of time that were in there that I encountered men along the way that
mhm,
were inappropriate towards me. One was a pastor, one
mhm,
was someone that I had babysat for down the street.
mhm,
So they just, and these were adult big men. I was a teenager, like a young teenager, just like babysitting in that age. And
mhm.
so I just, for whatever reason, attracted the eye of some not so good people when I was coming up in my childhood.
Your parents divorced, and then you were living with your mother and your stepfather,
Correct.
and that's where the physical abuse was. I know you talked about the being bullied and then getting beat up, and what about the physical abuse within the family?
My When my mother married my stepfather, they had, even before they got married, there was physical. He was beating her. He was, that was a constant thing that was going on. She married him anyway, and so she was being constantly beaten. And
Mm,
so on one of the days that I had babysat, I came home really late. It was like 3 o'clock in the morning, and the
mhm,
following morning he was having like a poker party down in the basement, and he was
mhm.
having all his buddies over. He wanted the house cleaned. He got mad at me and he just walked up on me and just started beating me with an extension cord. And if you know extension cords, and he doubled, like quadrupled it up, and he was hitting from
Mhm.
there, and it just did damage all over my body. I still
Oh,
have a scar on this arm
mhm.
from that beating as a child. The scar remains from there.
Wow, and you recoiled. Did you try to leave home? How were you at the time?
I was about 14 or 15.
14 or 15.
Hmm.
And what happened? Did you try to leave home? Did you talk to your mother about it?
After he beat me, I went upstairs and I had on sweatpants. I pulled my pants down because my thighs were like throbbing, and I
Mhm.
looked at my thighs, and the welts on my thighs were like made my legs look almost double in size,
Gosh.
and that freaked me out really bad. And then I became just enraged, and I
Mhm,
was just like, I'm out of here. So I got my clothes on. I left the house. My mom opened the door and was yelling for me to come back, and I had to get out of there at that moment. I couldn't stay in there because I was hurt and I was angry because
mhm, mhm,
I just felt like, you really, you know, and,
mhm.
and she could do nothing. She stood up. She stood up and said, "You can't come in here and start beating her like that." And then he hit
Oh,
her. He hit her with the extension cord as well.
mm.
So
She
it was
stayed
just,
with her. Mhm,
yeah,
mm,
it was terrible, and so, a lot of the trauma that I went through as when I was younger, I used to blame my mom and I would just get so angry with her. But
mhm.
as an adult, I can look back now and see she was dealing with her own set of trauma and her own issues, and she was dealing with the best way that she could, or that she knew how to do. She just didn't have the ability at that time because she was going through her stuff. She
Mhm.
couldn't look at me and see what was going on.
Right, right, and being a 15-year-old, I would imagine you were really, really angry at your mother for not doing more to protect you or get out of there.
Yeah, I was mad. My brother experienced a lot of trauma in that household as well.
Mhm.
And it's just because we were treated differently. We were not. They had their own little core family now. It
Your
was
your
that
step your step, siblings.
Yes. And
Mhm,
then it was us. So it was us in this household, and he never really treated us like we were his children. We were
mm,
like outsiders in the house. And so that was a very frustrating, very damaging to both of us.
mm, mm, and your
He
mother
would,
did finally leave, though.
huh?
Your mother did finally leave
Eventually, it took
eventually.
a lot of extra stuff for her to finally make the decision, and some bad decisions along the way getting to that point. But eventually, many years later, she finally did.
Hmm. And so are you still angry at your mother years later? Have you guys worked through that, talked
We
about it?
have the we have, and I, I'm an adult now, and so I can look at it through a different set of eyeglasses.
Hmm.
And we talk like literally every day, and sometimes multiple times a day. And that was just, I have to love her and accept that this is what she was going through things and didn't know how to deal with things in, in a way that I felt was appropriate for me. But
Right.
it's because she was dealing with her own issues and wasn't able to do that. And so I had to forgive my mother. And there are periods you'll see when you read in the book that I said I hated my mother.
Mm,
At this point, I hated her. There are two places
right.
in there, and it's just things that had happened that caused me more pain and more trauma. So,
Mm.
but
And
I love her.
mhm,
I love my mother,
mm,
and but again, I'm an adult and I can look back with different eyeglasses and see that. But as
ex-
a child, it's hard to deal with
right.
that when you don't have a frame of reference to go with.
Your mother's first husband, your father.
My father, yes.
Right. When they first got divorced, there was an incident, right? As you saw your mother packing up the car. I think I read something about that in the book.
Yeah, this is my dad, and they I guess they had got into arguments. We didn't know that they were even struggling. We just
Mm,
woke up one day and she was packing the car, and then I said, "Where are we going?" And she said, "I'm leaving your dad." So, and I was standing there like, "What?" And then of course I'm a child, so I said, "Well, I don't want to leave dad." And she said, "Well, stay here then."
mm,
And those words, I didn't realize until I was an adult, are probably the catalyst to all of the things that I went through. Because when she said that to me, I felt like I needed to choose between her and my dad. Who do I go with? Who do I stay with? With him? Do I go with her? I chose to go with her. And in my child mind, because I chose to go with her, I ended up getting abused because of that. So
mm.
therefore, the abuse was my fault because I chose wrong. That's
Wow.
how I saw it as a child,
As a child.
and
Wow.
it just stayed in my head the whole time. That negative self-talk is my fault. I caused that. It was my fault that they're getting divorced, because why would they get divorced? I must have done something wrong to make my parents want to get divorced. So I blame myself for that. I blame myself for the abuse because I chose the wrong parents to go live with.
So you have this blame displacement issue when you look at it, because you put everything on yourself, and that was not the place where it should have been. Tell us about uh, your entry into the music world. How old you were? How did it happen? And how did it made you feel?
Well, I was in elementary school in the fourth grade, and one of the teachers just came through picking up kids, and she called my name. We all walked down to the basement, and then there were instruments everywhere. And she told us that the previous year she had given us a listening test. It was a music test, and I'm like, yeah, I remember that. And she went through now in the fourth grade, and she pulled all the kids that scored in the top 10% of
Mhm,
all of the third graders, and
mhm.
then we were invited to take orchestra. And I picked the violin, and I went home, called my grandmother, and told her, "Hey, guess what? They picked me to be an orchestra," and I chose the violin. And then she told me about my aunt, Marilyn, my mom's sister, that
Mhm.
she had played all the way up through high school, and then she quit after high school, and she still had her violin. So she
Oh.
gave me her violin,
Mhm.
and so I pretty much have always had my own instrument, and I still have that instrument. It's my spare,
Mhm.
and whenever my professional violin is in service, I use that instrument.
Oh, nice, nice. And that violin and music in general became your safe place. But
Yeah,
mm,
especially after school. So when I would come home after being bullied all day, because bullying was a daily event for me. So I'd come home and I'd go home. My brother would pick on me, or my cousin would do his thing. And so music, I would go and play and practice my violin. I just
mhm,
created my own little music world. And so when
mm,
I was there in that music world, nothing else mattered. That was the most important thing. My violin, my aunt's the one that my aunt gave me.
mhm,
His name is Michi,
mhm.
and me and Michi were best friends. I could tell Michi everything. I
Oh,
could express all my feelings, and Michi would understand.
I love that name, Michi. Wow. Um, but then there was an incident that interrupted your flow of that music being your safe place. Tell me about the incident where that safe place was violated.
Well, this was actually just not too long ago, a few years back. I was in my music class teaching, and one of the students in my fourth grade class threw a tantrum, and he assaulted me in the classroom. And he yanked my lanyards and ripped it down and injured my neck, actually. And I didn't realize that there was a problem until after, like, a couple of days after the incident, and I kept having like these uncontrolled bouts of crying, just random crying all the time. And
Mm,
I was like, what is going on? And so I went to they have a thing you can go to and get free counseling for teachers
mhm,
and staff members
mhm,
in the school district. And so I called, and they set me up with a counselor, and I started explaining that to her and talking to her about it. And she told me, after I explained the whole incident of the that attack,
mhm,
she realized immediately that there was something going on inside my head
mhm,
that needed to be addressed. I don't know how she figured it out, but she knew immediately. And she said, "You got some unresolved issues going on, and
mm,
we need to let's have some sessions and talk about it." And it wasn't until I literally had to go back and relive my whole entire life, because what had happened is all of the traumatic experiences that I had gone through from
mhm,
childhood through adulthood, my
mhm,
brain took all those things and it packed it away in the back of in my brain somewhere. It locked
mm.
it away.
Buried it.
But
Mm,
yeah, there it is, so I could
mhm,
survive and
mhm,
continue living. And so that incident shook me up in a place that I was safe. And now I'm no longer safe in that music classroom. And then
mhm.
that set me up for having to deal with that. And so I literally had to go back and relive my whole life and go through all of those experiences to address them and deal with them so that I could move forward.
Mm, mm. Wow, your safe place. Yeah, you now you started looking at music totally differently. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah,
Um,
through that process, though, um, talking to her after going through all of that, she helped me to realize that music is something that I do, but it's not who I am. And because I had attached that music part to my identity,
mhm,
when I
mhm,
was affected in the classroom, my identity was affected as well. So
mm.
I had to learn to separate the thing that I do from the person that I am.
I just want to talk a little bit about how abuse, sexual abuse, physical abuse, mostly sexual assaults, can impact us for a lifetime. Um, I was looking at this study in this article. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, associates the adverse experience during childhood with a series of long-term impacts on one's health. And we're talking about the impact of child abuse on females' health, including physical, mental, and society and social health, I should say.
Mhm.
So you talk about in the book about your low self-esteem, and there's also a quote. It says you reference underdeveloped sense of self-worth. So tell us about that and how that impacted you with the weight, with your self-esteem, with all of that of who you are.
Yeah, it that whole self-esteem thing became shaky for me with the incident with my mom and the stay here then, because that right there, that blame game started there. And
Mhm,
so I started feeling like I was the cause of all the whatever's going wrong with the world. I'm a bad person because
mhm,
of all of this. And so it started there. And then as I um, started using food for comfort, I
mhm,
started putting on weight. And so I
mhm,
was being molested. And then the only person that I could count on, that I could talk to, was Michi. And
mm,
so that
Black
food
men.
became a comfort to me because I couldn't talk to my mom about it. And the only person in the world that knew what was going on was my brother, and he was dealing with his own issues with that same cousin as well. Not
Oh,
sexual, but he
but
was mean, very mean to him as well. And so he was struggling. And so my whole sense of identity, of worth, all of that, I didn't have any. I hated myself. I,
oh,
I literally hated myself when I was younger because I felt like I was the cause of all the problems that I was experiencing. And so I have to be a bad person, because why on earth would all these things be happening to me?
mm,
you know and so as I continued to use food to comfort, I started putting on weight, and
mhm,
then I started to get worse in myself, my self-esteem, because I was bigger, and then the kids were bullying me because
mhm,
I was bigger than everybody else. And so all of that wrapped around this, that one incident for me, and then it just spanned out throughout my everything else in my life was
mhm,
all tarnished and warped. That warped sense of identity was it
mhm.
was I just didn't have it at all, and there was no one that I could talk to about it because nobody knew what was happening to me except for my brother.
And then when you were younger, you didn't know. You didn't know.
I didn't know. Yeah.
Right? It's oh my gosh. And now, and then that, of course, that transfers into your relationship with men. Then you start being attracted, to men who don't value you. And in
Hmm.
your book, you discuss your rape. You were actually raped, and what happened afterwards. Tell us about that. That's an interesting story.
Yeah, I was dating someone, and we had gone on our first date, and he asked me if I wanted to come up. He lived next door to me, and he
Hmm.
asked me if I wanted to come up and watch a little TV or hang out for a little bit. And
Hmm.
I stupidly said yes. I in my mind I was like, "Don't do it, just go home." But I went. So of course, this was getting ready to happen. It's my fault. Of course, we already
Right.
know that's
Right.
the answer. And
Hmm.
so I got up there, and he assaulted me, and I completely blame myself
Hmm.
for the incident.
Hmm.
And because had I gone with my gut instinct, I would have gone home and I would have been okay. And so eventually I ended up marrying the man that assaulted me.
You married your rapist.
I married my rapist. Yeah.
And how long did that marriage last?
2.5 years.
And so what went through your mind is like, okay, he's already assaulted you, but then you're marrying me. Then you're marrying him? Was there any um point in the back of your head where you're like, he's already hurt me? What made you go forward with that, I guess, is what I'm trying to ask.
Well, the reality was he needed his green card.
Hmm.
So he used me to get his green card. And
Hmm.
so the day before we were going to get married, we were sitting on our steps, and something told me, "Wait, ask him this question. Why do you want to marry me?" And he said everything that I needed to hear. "Because I love you." And me searching for love in all the wrong places,
Right. And right.
believed him.
With a
And
low self-esteem, right?
yeah,
Looking for love,
that's
right?
what he said. And I
Mhm.
went ahead down the next day, and we went and got married. And come to find out throughout that whole relationship, he was not faithful to me. And which we ended up getting divorced. And but it was because of me not loving myself at that
Mhm.
time. And my sister warned me. She warned me that he was not a good guy. But because he was interested in me where other guys weren't, I just didn't listen and just went forward with what he said, and it was not a good thing for me. It almost destroyed me, actually. That
Wow.
whole little event in that period of time in my adult life, it
And you were
almost,
married, I'm sorry,
yeah.
2.5 years, I think it was, right?
Yeah, 2.5 years, and then we divorced,
Mhm.
and it just, yeah, very sad.
Very sad, but then again, like we were talking about earlier, the door closing and another one opens. You're getting through that trial, and
Yeah.
tribulation, and you're learning from that experience to bring on something better, right? And what's right for you. So after that, then you already had your father. He's a good man in your life, right? And so
Yes.
talk about your father, and then talk about your current husband. Um, that's another good man in your life,
Yeah.
who loves and adores you. How did you know he was ready? How did you know that you were ready to move on? And how did you know that he was the one? And also, please tell me about your father, the impact that he had as well.
Well, my dad, we didn't have the greatest of relationships when I was young. And
Hmm.
that was, we were going back and forth, all that kind of thing. And he remarried himself. But
Hmm.
when I became older, we became like friends, like best friends. And he loved me and he encouraged me to do. He became like my grandmother because my grandma passed away. And then he became that cheerleader for me. And he was
Mm,
actually one of the ones that really encouraged me to write the book. And,
mm,
and it just so happened that he passed away before I did that. And
mm,
so I felt that I needed to do that to honor my dad, to
mm,
put it down and to get it out. And he realized when I was going through all the counseling, he's just like, you need to get it out, open up and talk about it, get all these things out. And so through that whole counseling period,
mhm,
he was right there encouraging me to open up and share and to release.
mm,
And through that, I was able to really heal. And I could talk to my dad about anything. I talked to
mm,
him about pretty much everything, even more before I even did with my mom. My
mm.
dad was that cheerleader, and I was able to talk to him. And then eventually start talking to my mom about it. But he was the one for that.
Wow.
And
And then before you talk about your husband, there was a college professor,
mhm,
right? Who
yeah,
who mhm,
I had several teachers in my life that were very supportive. They were men and very supportive. But my violin teacher at Ball State, Neil Weintraub,
mhm,
he was the first person outside of my brother that realized something was wrong. And I would go into these lessons, and then one day he sat down and he said, "I need to ask you a question." He said, "Were you sexually abused when you were younger?" And the deer in the headlights, like, "Whoa, where'd that come from?" And he said,
right.
"Let me explain." He said, "Every time I walk close to you, you move away from me." And I never realized I was doing that. It was completely in my head, in my
Mhm,
mind. I
mhm,
didn't know that I was doing that. And we talked about it and I shared. He was the first like man person that I actually shared that with. And
mm,
I appreciated him for letting me do that. I
mhm,
was not ready to deal with it at the time. And after we had conversations, it went right back in there. It just boom, gone. And then I just went on with life. But he was the very first person that I actually openly shared what had happened to me with.
wow. And then over the years, and you say you just recently started therapy, right?
Yeah,
For
it was
everything.
because of that incident, and then I took some therapy,
Mhm,
and it's like the perfect therapist came my direction. She was a
mm,
sister from Chicago, and
mhm.
she did not let me get away with blaming myself for anything that I wasn't supposed to be. She was like, "Nope, you don't get to take that. Mm-mm, not at all." But I was like, "But I didn't." Nope, no, ma'am. She would not let me do it, and so I had to kind of look at that and just see that though that blame game was all attached
Mhm,
to the
mhm,
whole I don't have any self esteem kind of thing.
mhm,
So it was her that actually helped me to realize that there was more to me than what I actually saw. She was a
mm.
re- she was a religious person, so and she knew that I was, so she used spiritual things to help pull me through that. So that was just a huge blessing.
Yeah. All right. And I just mentioned it about your husband, your current husband, who loves and
Mhm.
adores you. And again, how did you know that he was the one? And how did you know that you were ready to bring someone into your life and to love again?
Yeah. Well, I was older now, so some years had gone by. I was still
Mhm,
alone, and I
mhm,
realized that I needed to seek for someone. And so I went on to a couple of dating sites, and they were primarily directed around people in my faith, but there were other people in there too. And the
mhm,
first three guys were like terrible. They were like really, really like sexual predator type people, something.
mm,
And so, but something told me, okay. So then I was like, I'm not doing this anymore. Forget it. This is not good. We're back to the same thing again.
Mm-hmm.
And then they kept sending me these notifications. Hey, somebody look at your profile. Come back. And so I went back, and then my husband's profile was on there. It was new. So while I went out and stopped using the sites, he came on because somebody in his area where he was in Minneapolis
Mm-hmm.
encouraged him to go on to try to find somebody. And
Oh,
so
wow.
then we came back together at the same time. And
Mhm.
I just sent him a little message, said, hey, nice profile. And he sent me a message back and said, hey, well, what do you like about it?
I
And
love
then,
that.
yeah.
And
And then we just
you
started
guys are
talking from
married.
there. Yeah.
Okay, you've been married how long?
It's been 20 years,
Oh, that's yeah,
Yeah,
20. Wow, 20
we
years.
just had our 20th anniversary on June 1st.
Mm-hmm.
And we only met like literally 3 times before we got married.
Wow, and 20 years later. That's
Hmm.
amazing. I
Yeah,
love that. And he's from Kenya, right?
he is. He is. He's in East Africa, and he lived in the Makueni district in Kenya.
Okay, and your name, your Cheney,
Mhm.
that's an African name because there's a tradition or something in Africa where you take on your husband's, where you have to have an
Mhm.
African name, right?
Yeah, so my legal name is Rechel Bryant Nganga. The last name Nganga was his. When he became a citizen over here, he changed his name completely. His name, when I met him, was
Mhm.
Jonah Matee Nganga. And then when he got his citizenship, we waited and went to a courthouse so he could change his name. And they did that for free with that process. So he changed his first name to Chuma, which means like strong, like as steel, strong as steel. And
Mm.
his middle name and last name were reversed when they did his document. So he corrected that. So now he became Chuma Ganga Mate. So his
Okay.
last name now is, even though both names are his, my
Mm.
legal name is Ganga and his is Mate. So um,
Oh.
we're married, but we have two different names because I had to go to court and change all that. I didn't
Okay.
want to do that. So as tradition, when you marry, the husband gives you a new name, and my name that he gave me is Cheney, which means light.
Mm. Okay. I
Yeah,
love that. I can see that. It's
yeah.
perfect for you. Very, 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 right on with that.
Mhm,
Um, now you have been to Kenya several times,
mhm.
right? You took a teacher, a group of teachers first, and then your students,
Yeah.
some orchestra students. Tell us about those visits.
Yeah, the very, very first time I went, it was just me and my husband, so I can get to meet his family. But I
Mhm.
started a project there that first time, and then a service project with an underserved school. And
Mhm.
so then I came back like 3 years later, and I brought a group of teachers, and we went, and then we did that, and we planted some trees at one. We found this other school that was very, very, very in deplorable conditions,
Mhm.
and we planted some trees there for that school. And then I've been two other additional times where I've taken students from my youth orchestra, and they we plant more trees and they do performances around Kenya.
That that is so cool. That's just phenomenal, and I'm sure they love Kenya. They had a good time.
Yeah, very. I mean, some of the kids never would have ever been able to go had we
Mhm.
not gone in that type of setting. The first group that I took, there was only I think two of them that went with parents. The rest of them were just with me, and their parents let them go, with me as their chaperone, basically. And and then we just the last group, everybody came with at least one parent.
Okay.
Yeah, which was
Oh,
great for us because
yeah.
the leaders were in a van by ourselves, and the rest of
Mhm,
them were in other vans with
mhm,
their parents, and so we didn't have to do any of the parenting or anything like that. So that was pretty cool too.
mhm. I like that.
Yeah.
All right, now I have to ask, before we go, I have to ask if
Mhm.
there's anything you wanna share with other women who, also experience sexual abuse as a young person who hasn't done the work like you.
Mhm.
Um, um, that's needed, and, so what words do you have to say to them? Any encouragement or advice or anything?
I think that the first thing that we have to all know is that we're all daughters of God. We're all special. We're all unique in our own way. And one of the first things that those types of experiences do is it takes away your identity.
Mhm.
You
Mm,
lose, oftentimes lose that. And so
mhm,
you got to remember that that identity is there. No one can take that from you. You can relinquish it and you can give that away, but no one can take it from you. And, when we attach the trials that we go to, that we go through with that, that can also mess us up as well. And yes, some trials are very hard. They're very hard, but at the same time, when we are able to gain the strength that we need to overcome those trials, we
mhm,
become better because of it. One of my church leaders said in a talk one time that he said the hottest fire makes the strongest steel. And so part of life is about going through trials and overcoming. And
mhm,
the strength that we gain is because we've been singed a little bit here and there.
mhm.
You
Oh,
can't you
mm,
can't grow if everything is this perfect, rainbows all the time. You
right.
can't grow. Even
Mm,
some mother birds kick their babies out the nest, and if you either fly or you don't,
that's right.
kind of So it's part of life, and I'm not downplaying the actions of others.
You're right.
They are
Of
completely
course.
accountable to
Mhm,
the things that they do.
mhm,
But
mm,
what I'm saying is, you as an individual need to make sure that you don't attach that to who you are as a person, because there's two different things. The trauma you're going through is not who you are. It's
mm,
part of what your life experience is.
mm.
You're
I
you're
like that.
beautiful. You're beautiful because of you, and no one can take that away.
Woo, woo, good stuff. Thank you. Thank you so much. And you have done so much in your life already. So what's next for you? What's on your agenda next?
I'm still writing. I've started a second book, and
Mm,
I'm also writing some music things. I want to do a a methods book, and there are a
mhm,
bunch of other things that I want to do. And so I'm kind of doing that and just looking for things that I want to do. I've spent all my life doing things for others and taking
mhm,
care of other people. And
mhm,
now I'm at a place where I'm able to say no now. And I wasn't able to do that, because I always felt guilty if I said no. Well, if I
mhm.
say no, then I feel bad because, I should have helped somebody. No, no, this means I'm not available to do that at this time. Doesn't
Right.
mean I will never do it, but right now I can't do that
That's
because
right.
I have this that I'm prioritizing. And,
That's right.
and the next thing for me is working now now that I am feeling some sense of love for myself. I'm ready
Mm,
to allow my body to get rid of all the protection and the padding that is padded on there for me. All the
mm.
padding that I was eating away is all sitting out here on my body for the whole world to see. But it was my body's way of protecting me, and then so now it's time for me to start protecting my body and helping it to allow me to release that and to move forward in my life.
Ooh, I love that. Love that. And what you said about the priority, making yourself a priority. I thought about, as you get older, that's what happens too. It's like it's my time.
Mhm.
Wisdom with age. You have
Absolutely,
to come into my world now.
absolutely,
Mhm,
absolutely.
mhm.
Mhm.
This has been great. Has been so great, Shani. I appreciate you coming on the podcast. We've been chatting, you guys, with Kyeni Matee, a violinist and youth orchestra teacher, and the author of her new book, The Eyes Behind the Violin, a memoir, Finding My True Identity. Okay, Shani, where can people grab a copy of your book?
You can actually purchase it online at any of your online booksellers. Pretty much all the major booksellers, it's there. Books, Barnes and Noble,
Mhm,
Amazon,
mhm.
Walmart, Target, any of those places, you can get it online.
Okay, perfect, perfect. It's such a good book, guys. Such a good book. You have to pick it up. Seriously, you have to pick it up. And I also want to post your information, where people can contact you, where they can follow you. I'm going to post all that information when I post the podcast, and the information about the podcast. And follow her, guys. Just show her love. And she's a beautiful person inside and out. And I'm just so thankful she came on this show and shared this very relatable subject with us. Thank you so much, Amy.
Thank you.
All right, you've been listening to the Ageless Glamour Girls podcast, where we talk all things aging on this wonderful, transformative journey. Please don't forget to subscribe to our show. And if you want to join the conversation and be a guest on our show, whether you have a new book or not, email us at info@agelessglamourgirls.com. That's info@agelessglamourgirls.com. And don't forget to check out our private Facebook group called the Ageless Cafe. We're also on Instagram and other social media platforms. And I also want to call this to your attention. Please don't forget to grab a copy of our new book. It's called An Anthology, Ageless Glamour Girls Reflections on Aging. Let us know what you think about it. Leave a review at Amazon or wherever on the book's page. And by the way, we're also now collecting names, applications for our second volume. So if you're interested in it's an anthology. I don't know if I said that. It's an anthology. So if you're interested in being a part of our second volume, drop us a line at info@agelessglamourgirls.com, and you can put the subject line volume 2 book or something like that. Thank you so much. We appreciate you guys. Love you, love you, love you. Again, I'm Marquita Curtis Haynes, founder and CEO of the lifestyle brand Ageless Glamour Girls. I'm also the host of the podcast of the same name. Thank you so much for joining us, everybody. Keep sharing your stories, preferably with us. But yeah, I'm just kidding. You just share your stories. So, as you get older, we all have great stories, and so many stories like this one today that can motivate and inspire others. And we appreciate you continuing to share your stories. Thanks so much for being with us, everybody. Here's to healthy aging and joyful living. We'll see you again real soon, lovies. Bye-bye for now.